Hola y bienvenidos al episodio de hoy, que es un plato cubano, Ropa Vieja. For the non-Spanish speakers, I just said hello and welcome to today's episode, which is a Cuban dish, old clothes. If you've been watching the channel for a while, you'll know that I'm always more than happy to take viewer requests. And I had one a couple of weeks ago on the bean burger video, asking if I could make a plant-based version of Ropa Vieja with jackfruit. I'd never heard of the dish, so I did a quick bit of Googling and instantly thought, yeah, I'm definitely making that because it sounds incredible. According to the brief bit of research I did, the dish originates in Spain and then has kind of spread out into the world, particularly in Spanish-speaking countries, and is now Cuba's national dish. The name Ropa Vieja, the literal translation is old clothes. I saw two theories. One was that because it uses tougher cuts of meat, it's like leftovers, old kind of stuff. The other one was because it's made with, I think it's skirt steak, which needs to be cooked really slowly and then it falls apart and shreds and looks kind of like tattered cloth. The commenter requested that I make the dish with jackfruit, so that is what I'm going to do. But I'm going to use some mushrooms. I just find the texture of jackfruit a little bit too soft, hasn't got quite enough chew. But the mushrooms are completely optional. I'm also going to make a very quick version of Cuban black beans to serve on the side along with some rice. When I'd Googled the recipe, the first one that I looked at sounded very similar to a cacciatore that I'd made a couple of weeks before. Cacciatore is an Italian dish. It's like a hunter's stew, tomato based with veggies, meat and herbs, that kind of thing. From the quick scan that I did, it looks very similar, except changing a couple of the spices and herbs. Because it's plant-based, you don't need to be stewing anything for hours. So I think it's going to be a pretty quick thing to do. And it'll be great for midweek things, if you want to do something really quickly. Like the cacciatore I made after work. So I think I started at 6:30, something like that, and was eating it by 7:15. And that included all the tidying up and stuff. So a very quick and easy thing to make. I'm going to start off by drizzling in a good 2, maybe 3 tablespoons of olive oil into my big pot. I'm going to start by dicing a medium white onion, maybe 1 centimetre or so. I've got the remains of a bunch of celery. I'm going to chuck all of that in, so it's probably the equivalent of 4 ribs, but I'm going to use leaves and everything. I'll go a little bit thinner on this maybe. Got 2 carrots, I'm just going to give them a peel, top and tail. I think I'll do the thinner ends into quarters, thicker ends maybe I'll do in 3. It's a good amount of olive oil in there. Give that a stir to coat everything in oil. Normally when I'm sauteing vegetables, I'll do it on 6 or 7. I'm going to try doing it on 4 with the lid on. To save a bit of electricity, save a bit of cash, but also this will trap steam in, which might help soften the veg down a little bit faster. I'm going to chop down some bell peppers. I've got 1 yellow, 1 orange. I went to 2 shops and neither of them had red peppers for some reason. And again, I'm going to go fairly large dice on the peppers. I think I'll keep that amount of each for the beans. And then just cut that into strips. So every few minutes I'm going back and stirring the other veg. If I'm putting anything in that you really don't like, just use something else instead. I never used to like peppers until I hit my 30s. So in that case, skip them and you could use more onion, more celery, more carrot, that kind of thing. So that's all the peppers done. Get them in the pot. So it probably took 5-6 minutes, something like that, to do the peppers. So they're softening down very nicely. I'm going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and that will help pull some of the moisture out of the veggies. I've got 5 huge cloves of garlic. I'll keep 1 for the beans. Just mincing the garlic in a press just for ease. So I mentioned I was going to put some mushrooms in, totally optional. In my bowl I've been hydrating a dried lion's mane, and I did that in chicken flavour stock. So I'm just going to squeeze out some of the moisture. Lion's mane's got a really nice meaty texture, which goes very nicely alongside the jackfruit. I'll keep that bit of liquid because then that can go in the dish as well. All I'm going to do is cut it into thin strips. I'm going to stack slices. Try rolling it. I get the dried lion's mane from the Chinese supermarket. Not too expensive or anything. And I've used these before in the kind of meatballs, in the vegan pulled pork. Just a very nice thing to have in the cupboard for getting some meaty kind of textures. If I'd had 2 of the mushrooms, I would have put 2 in, but I only had 1 left. So here is where we're at. Add the garlic. Yeah, that's sweated down really nice. And I've not had it any higher than 5. In my little tub here, I've got some toasted cumin and coriander seeds that I've then just blitzed down in the pestle and mortar. A teaspoon, maybe a teaspoon and a half. I'm gonna do 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne pepper, teaspoon or so of dried oregano, teaspoon of smoked paprika. I've got some generic chili powder, probably a teaspoon, something like that. I've got some chipotle chili flakes. Chipotles are smoked jalapenos, got a really good flavour. I'm gonna do, yeah, like a teaspoon. I really enjoy spice and heat. If you don't, just cut that back. That's not a problem. And if you haven't got a particular one that I'm using, you could just buy a bag of like taco seasoning, something like that. 1/4 teaspoon of allspice. You'll also see it, I want to say pimenta. I'll add 4 whole cloves. And then I'm going to use some dried avocado leaves. They taste very similar to bay leaves, so feel free to just use bay. So I'll chuck in a few of those. That's been frying off for a couple of minutes. So I'm going to chuck in some white wine, 200 mils, something like that. Skip the wine if you don't want it, not a problem. And I'll just use that to clean the bottom of the pan. Get all those stuck on bits, because that's flavour. Techniques known as deglazing. So I'm going to do a good couple of tablespoons of tomato puree. You have to forgive the light going off a sec. I'm going to use some of these tiny little capers. Blotted those and I ran the knife over it a couple of times just to make it slightly smaller. Then in my dish here I've got like 20 green olives that I've sliced down. I'm going to add about a tablespoon or so of chicken flavour stock. I use the Mussel plant-based. Add a tin of chopped tomatoes. I'll rinse out the can with a bit of hot water. So that was probably 200 mils of water, and I'll hold off on any more salt for now because it had that 1/4 teaspoon. I did the mushrooms and a little bit of salt, which I'll explain in a second, and the stock is salty, so I don't want it over salted. Do a really good grind of black pepper. You could also use a seasoning mix like Old Bay seasoning. That's got a lot of the ingredients that I've used. I'm gonna add in the lion's mane. In my bowl here, I've got 300 grams of chestnut mushrooms that I've grated and roasted. So I lined my air fryer with some foil just to trap all the juice in, because then the juice can kind of concentrate. Stirred in some olive oil, tiny bit of salt, and air fried them 15 minutes at 180, stirring halfway through. And then I did another 15 at 150, stirring halfway through. And it kind of dries them out and shreds them down. So then putting them back in liquid will plump them back up again. Put that mushroom juice in now so I don't forget. And then this is the all-important jackfruit. It's better to use jackfruit in water than brine because it's not going to have that flavour that brine stuff does. To prep it, I just gave it a really good rinse under cold water and then blotted it on tea towels. I went through and kind of broke it down with my hands, squeezing seeds out when I saw them. That stage probably isn't 100% necessary, but you'll find there's kind of tough bits of core in there. That's one of the reasons I don't love using jackfruit, because I end up wasting at least 1/3 of a tin. But, you know, this was a request, so I'm always happy to do things like that. I'll do a quick check of the flavour at this stage, and then that's going to simmer for kind of, well, until the beans are done. I'm going to put in another teaspoon of chipotle. Pop the lid on, turn it up to 6, let it come up to a kind of high simmer, and I'll drop it to a low simmer. Onto the beans. With a dish like this, it's probably better to use dried beans, because then you can get flavour in at the soaking stage. Couldn't find any dried black beans. So I'm going to make mine with the can of beans. When I searched for Cuban black beans, a recipe popped up, and I'm going to kind of base mine on theirs. I'll link to it in the description. Looks to be a very simple recipe, so hopefully it will be. So I'm going to warm up about a tablespoon of olive oil in a small pan, well, medium pan. And I think I'll do the trick with keeping the lids on, because the other benefit is A, the kitchen isn't getting full of steam, and B, the kitchen doesn't smell of onions, which is great. I'm going to tell you now so I don't forget. The original recipe says to add water. I'm going to add beer, because why not? So it'll be a blend of Cuban black beans and frijoles borrachos, which is drunken beans, because I think that'll be delicious. Feel free to use water. I'm going to slice down those bits of pepper that I reserved, and this time I'm going to go quite fine on them. And then I've got a small red onion, so I'll do again quite a fine dice on that. You could do this in the food processor or a food chopper. And then I've got 4 very thin spring onions. I'm just going to take off the outer bit of peel. I'll go through it kind of finely, and then I'll take the knife back through it. That's everything chopped down nicely, so we'll get those in the pan. So I've been heating up a tablespoon of olive oil. Give that a stir to coat everything. Give that a couple of minutes with the lid on. I'm going to open the beans just so they're ready, but I'm not going to drain them. The recipe says not to drain them. So they had a couple of minutes. I think I'll do the garlic. So again, because I'm using the lid, I'm only having it on the 5. It's a much less aggressive heat, so things are much less likely to burn. I'm going to go in with a bit of black pepper, pinch of salt. I'll do like a half teaspoon or so of, well, might as well finish off the pot, why not? So probably a teaspoon of oregano, small avocado leaf. If you're using bay leaves in the big pot, do maybe 4 or 5, then this one do 2 or 3. And then I'll do a half teaspoon of the cumin and coriander. I did pour out some of the bean liquid just because it was very, very liquid. And then I want like 100 mils or so of beer. That's just a lager that I'm using. You could use a nice deep dark brown ale, that'd be delicious. I'm gonna add a splash of red wine vinegar. I'll do like half a teaspoon at this stage, and then towards the end I'll check it and see if it needs any more, and adjust the seasoning as well. When the beans are nearly done, I'll add in a big handful of chopped coriander, like fresh coriander. So now that's come to a boil, I'll drop that to a 3, and then that's going to simmer for 15 minutes, which will give me time to put a batch of rice on, clean down, and then I'll see you back here for the eating. So here is the Ropa Vieja, all looking very tender and succulent and juicy. And there are the beans down the hatch. That's delicious. There's lots of really deep flavours, but it's quite light at the same time. It's very vibrant and zingy and not overwhelmingly hot and spicy. It's kind of complex, but in a really nice way. For me, adding the mushrooms in was a good choice. Jackfruit does have that kind of shreddy texture, but ultimately is fruit, so there's only so far you can get it. Whereas adding the mushrooms in just gives you an extra bit of something between your back teeth. Try the beans. I'm very happy I added the beer. It's a really good flavour in there. And the beans have got a great texture. They're nice and firm. You know, like, as opposed to kidney beans, which are just very soft. These have got a really nice bit of bite to them. And put that down. I haven't had any lunch or dinner yet. I did think about putting a dash of cinnamon in the Ropa Vieja. And I think it would be quite nice. When I reheat some tomorrow for dinner, I might put a little sprinkle in rather than putting some in the whole pot. But I think it would be very welcome in there. It doesn't need it as such, but it would be really nice just to have an extra, because cinnamons are very kind of warm spice. Or nutmeg or blade mace, which grows on the outside of nutmeg. Both of those would be really nice in there as well. Just to give a little extra bit of something in there. It'd be delightful. The beans on their own will make a great dinner midweek as well. Yeah, because you're talking 20 minutes start to finish. I'm gonna have some of the leftovers as a burrito because that's gonna taste incredible with some guacamole, bit of plain yogurt. That'll be brilliant. Ooh, they'd also be nice on the bao that I made last week. It'd be delicious. I think the Ropa Vieja mix, if you cook it off a bit longer so that it's less liquid, I think that would be really nice in the tamales. I'll link to every video that I mention. I'll link to everything in the description. But I think that would go really nicely with the masa filling. Yeah, I'm drooling a bit. That's gonna taste so good. If you're trying to avoid white rice for whatever reason, that would be incredible with cheesy polenta. Yeah, that would be, oh, delicious. And if you didn't want the cheese, just skip the cheese and just have a nice polenta. Polenta is like a very fine cornmeal. And you can have it either dry and make kind of solid cakes out of it, or wetter, and it's more like potato puree kind of vibe. Very delicious, and it provides a really nice vehicle for heavily flavoured stuff. It's really, really good. I've made it a couple of times, so I'll link 20 videos in the description again. When I make it again, not if, when, I don't know if I'll bother with the jackfruit, but only because, as I say, I end up wasting a lot because I have to pick out the seeds and the cores. So it's kind of a bit of a waste of money. So I think it would work really good with the tofu, the method I do where you bake it or microwave it, whichever way you want. That will stop you getting the shreddy texture. That will vanish. Obviously, it'll be more of a chili kind of texture, but the flavours of it will be incredible. And it will give you that nice kind of bite to it. Or you could just use all mushrooms, that kind of thing. I need to say muchos gracias to Adrian, who suggested doing the dish. Thank you for putting the idea in my brain. That's gonna get made so many times. If you've got any requests, any suggestions, or want to know how to do something, always feel free to leave a comment for me, and if I can, I'll do something for you. I'm going to serve out a bit more of that and sit down and eat properly rather than shoving mouthfuls in between trying to talk to camera. So I just need to say hello and a great big thank you to my patrons for buying all of my ingredients. Patreon's a platform where fans and viewers can give a little bit of financial recompense to their favourite creators each month. There are different tiers on mine that you can choose from. Pick whatever's affordable for you, and in return you get access to some bonus features. If you want more ideas of how to make a plant-based twist on your favourite foods, like this video and subscribe to the channel. Tap the little bell icon, you'll get an alert as soon as I publish a new one. While you're waiting for the next one, have a look at this.